This egg has been sitting in a water glass solution at room temperature for a year. What do you think? Do you think it's still good? Would you eat it? Hi, I'm Stacy from the blog FromScratchFarmhouse.com, and today I'm going to be going over everything water glassing, showing you exactly how to water glass eggs, and I'm going to be cooking these up so that you can see how they look. Before we get started, let's talk real briefly about why you'd want to water glass eggs in the first place. I first came across this preservation technique when I was looking for a way to preserve eggs in the spring when we had eggs coming out of our ears, and I wanted a way to preserve them so that we wouldn't have to buy them in the winter when our production would naturally go down. Now, I will say that up until now, we have chosen to supplement our chickens with light, which means that they don't stop laying entirely in the winter, but production does naturally go down. My goal this year is to preserve enough eggs through water glassing that we don't have to supplement with light this winter, and we can give our hens a much deserved break. Another interesting tidbit that I learned from a 1935 document from the USDA is that eggs preserved in May and June keep better than eggs preserved later in the season. This will encourage me to get started earlier this year and get my eggs preserved in the spring. I have no idea if this is true or why this would be, but I'm gonna go with it. Okay, going back to the original problem of needing a way to preserve eggs, I originally tried freezing and had pretty poor results. The best way of freezing I have found is to combine the white and the yolk, whisk them together, and then freeze them into pucks. I put them into muffin tins to make those egg pucks, and then I can thaw and use them from there. However, in anything where it is heavy in eggs, such as like scrambled eggs or even baked goods that call for a lot of eggs, you're gonna notice a difference in texture. Water glassing eggs is the egg preservation method that our great-great-grandparents used, and as soon as I heard that, I knew I had to try it. So originally, water glassing used water glass, also known as sodium silicate. In that 1935 document that I found on water glassing, the author suggests that farmers had more access to lime and that using the lime solution had satisfactory results. So nowadays we use mostly lime when we're referring to water glassing, as it is still easier to find and it is considered more food safe than sodium silicate. Water glassing has been amazing because when you use these eggs, they will pretty much act like fresh eggs. Okay, so even after I'd done all my research and I even started playing with the preservation technique, I still had a lot of questions. Was this really safe? Was this really gonna work? Am I gonna poison my family? In case you have some of those same concerns, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to water glass eggs, and I'm going to answer a lot of those questions. Okay, the first thing you're going to need is a container or jar. Now, it does not matter what size you use. However, I have found that the smaller containers work way better than, say, like a 5-gallon pail. The big 5-gallon pail that I originally used, I loaded up with eggs and then realized I couldn't move it, first of all. And second of all, if I did even move it around to try to access it, I was breaking eggs. Also, the eggs stacked on top of each other were putting weight on those bottom eggs and causing cracks. So I suggest using a 1 to 2 gallon container. I also highly recommend using plastic over glass, even though glass does give you a very pretty display of your water glassed eggs. However, I have found that I have had way more breakage in my glass containers rather than my plastic ones. This year I plan to use exclusively 1 to 2 gallon plastic containers. I'm going to use some repurposed containers. I might use some of these larger containers that I used last year. I believe these are 2.5 gallon. And then I also found some 1 gallon plastic containers on Amazon that I might be purchasing as well for this purpose specifically. And I'll link those in the description. Okay, so you have your container. The next thing you're going to need are some clean eggs. Now for us, this is going to be the biggest challenge to water glassing in the spring because we have so much mud and it is very hard to get clean eggs. So that's something we're going to have to work on. So I just have a couple clean eggs to work with today. The rest of my eggs came in pretty dirty. So you might be thinking, well, can't I just wash them? No, you cannot. If I go and wash this egg, I'm going to remove the protective bloom on the outside of the egg, which makes it unsafe for water glassing. You cannot wash your eggs first. They need to come clean. The third thing you're going to need is some calcium hydroxide, also known as lime or cal lime. I like to buy mine in bulk from Azure Standard, and I'll put that link below, but you can also get it from any place that sells canning supplies, and it is called pickling lime there. The next thing that you're going to need is just some water. Now, every tutorial I could find on YouTube or social media shows just using regular tap water for this process. However, when I was doing research and looking at how people used to do it, it was always advised that you boil the water and then cool it. Now, I realize that our water may be way more sanitary than back then, so maybe it's an unnecessary step to boil and cool it now. However, I will say that I did have some mold growth on the bottom of one of my lids, so I'm going to try this year boiling and cooling the water, just taking that extra step and seeing if that helps prevent any mold growth, and just because I feel better about it. You can choose to skip this step. Many people do and have lived to tell about it, including myself, but just so you know, the original recommended preservation technique included boiling and cooling the water. The other things you're going to need are something to weigh and measure your ingredients. And I use this exclusively for mixing up this lime solution, so I don't have to really stress about getting it super clean. Okay, so the actual process is very simple. I'm going to take my clean eggs and place them in this bucket very carefully so that they do not crack. Then I'm going to measure out my calcium hydroxide in this jar on the scale. I'm going to start by tearing out the scale and then measuring out 1 ounce of the lime powder per quart of water. Then I'm going to take that pre-measured amount of lime and mix it into my water until it is fully combined. After I mix this really well, I'm going to pour the lime solution over my eggs, making sure that the eggs are covered by 1 to 2 inches of the solution. Then I can just put my top on and store it someplace safe where it won't get knocked into, and that's mostly just a concern because you don't want the eggs to crack while they're in the bucket. You don't have to worry about storing this in a refrigerator or someplace cool. I do keep mine in the cellar where it stays fairly cool. However, I've talked to many people who keep their water glassed eggs in a much warmer environment and have had no issues. A few warnings with the calcium hydroxide. This is not something you want to be breathing in, so when you're measuring it out, make sure that you're not taking a big whiff of it. Just keep your head back and try not to breathe it, as it is not good for your lungs. Also, it is recommended that when you're putting your hands in the lime solution that you wear gloves. Now, I'm not a rebel on very many things, but I will say I am when it comes to this, so do what you feel comfortable with. It's definitely recommended to wear gloves simply because it is such a basic solution that it's going to dry out your hands very quickly. Now I'm going to answer the most common questions I get about water glassing eggs. And the first question I always get is, can water glassed eggs be used in the same way as fresh eggs? And how do they taste, act, and smell? And the answer to that is they act just like a fresh egg for the most part. So when you crack these eggs open, you're going to see that the yolk is not necessarily as firm as a fresh egg, which is common for any aged egg, including the ones you get at the grocery store. However, aside from that, it's going to act like a fresh egg, taste like a fresh egg, and smell like a fresh egg. If you were to crack one of these open and notice an odor or it just looked off, I would definitely toss it because that is not normal. You can also scramble these eggs up just like normal fresh eggs. The only thing I have not had success with doing is hard boiling them, but I just read that the trick to doing that is making a pinhole in the shell, and that just allows the air to escape so that when they're boiled, they don't explode. And so I'm going to be giving that a try. Another question I often get asked is this safe? So I feel very comfortable with this food preservation technique, in part because it's been used for so many years with success. But if it makes you feel better, calcium hydroxide is something that is still considered safe for use in food preservation, and it can be found at your regular store in the canning supplies. So I feel comfortable with that as well. Also, remember that you're using clean, unwashed eggs with the blooms still intact. So this is not grocery store eggs. You cannot go to the store and use those eggs for water glassing. These need to be farm fresh with the bloom intact. And the reason for this, part of the reason for this, is that it's not going to allow the lime solution to absorb into the egg. So you are not ingesting the lime solution. The next question is usually, how long will these eggs last in a water glass solution? And to that, I don't really have a cut and dry answer for you, unfortunately. However, I will say that I personally feel comfortable eating them up until about the year mark. With that said, if it was an emergency situation, you can bet that I'm going to be eating these eggs for much longer. As always, use your common sense. If it looks off, if it smells off, obviously don't eat it. Another thing that I'll add here is that I personally do not feel comfortable using these in raw egg recipes. So I'm not going to be using my water glassed eggs to make mayonnaise or eggnog or something like that. I just feel like there is more of a chance of these eggs containing a higher level of bacteria than a fresh egg, so I'm just going to save those things for fresh eggs only. Okay, now just for fun, I'm going to cook up some of these eggs so that you can get an idea of what a year-old water glassed egg looks like. First, I'm going to crack open a farm fresh egg laid today. Then I'm going to wash one of these year-old water glassed eggs and crack it open in the bowl on the right. You can see that the eggs look very similar, with the only noticeable difference being that the water glassed egg is lighter in color. Okay, let's cook a few of these eggs up. First, I will fry one. It cooked just like a fresh egg, except for the fact that the white was a little bit more runny. The yolk even stayed firm until I broke it intentionally. It looked, smelled, and tasted great. Then I scrambled one up, and you can see that it too looked great. This one even had a darker color, closer to that of the fresh egg. Overall, you can tell that there really isn't much difference in appearance between fresh and water glassed eggs. Alright, I think I've covered most of the basics on water glassing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any additional questions, just put them in the comments below, and I will do my best to respond to those as quickly as possible. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss my future content on homesteading, homeschooling, food from scratch, and creating a handmade home.